Hi, everybody. There we go. I'm Joseph Dangelmaier from Walters Kluwer Health. This is my talk, Amazon Connect and Healthcare IVR. So first question is, essentially, I'm not sure how many people in the room are familiar with Walters Kluwer. I wasn't when my company was bought by them. Okay. So Walters Kluwer itself is a multinational publishing and software company. Our division is Walters Kluwer Health. Essentially, we are part of every chain of the healthcare process, from the training to clinical decision-making and patient engagement and things like that, which is actually the next slide. I'm skipping ahead, but our big tagline is the reduced variability in healthcare, essentially making sure patients get the best, most up-to-date treatment possible each stage of the process. As I mentioned, I'm part of clinical effectiveness / Emmy, and the name of our game is patient engagement. Our primary product are web programs that either engage, I'm going to use that word a lot, patients, preparing them for their medical procedures, letting them know what's going on, or how to heal, or essentially the follow-up with procedures, essentially. So we'll have programs where if you're getting knee surgery, it'll let you know with multimedia what's involved with the surgery, how to prepare for it, what to expect, what the aftermath is. As I mentioned, I'm the IVR developer. We have some telephone programs, essentially. We have 3 or 4, depending on the account, primary programs. The first one is Emmy Prevent, which engages in large patient populations for one-off things like flu shot reminders, where we'll call patients for a provider who we know are due for flu shots, because that happens every year, say, hey, you need a flu shot. Similar things like appointment reminders, you have an appointment for so-or-so on this day, are you coming? To other things like scheduling appointments, where we'll have a whole population where we'll know you had a mammogram last year, we'll call them to remind them to get a mammogram this year if they're not scheduled already, find out if they're scheduled or not, report back to the providers. We have Emmy Transition and Emmy Smart, which are more long-term programs where we'll call daily or weekly or on a variable schedule if it's Emmy Smart to follow up on bigger issues. The flagship one is heart failure, where we'll call every day after a patient's been released having had heart failure to make sure they're okay, give them health tips, collect their weight, because if their weight changes too much on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis, that could be a red flag for providers, and we will notify their doctor to let them know something is potentially wrong. The last one, because I wanted a third bullet point, is notifications. For those web programs I was describing before, if they're prescribed by a doctor but the patient hasn't watched them yet, we can call the patient and say, hey, you were prescribed this, please go watch it. Here's your code, here's the website. So we have over the 200 applications, 1,200 campaigns. We have a lot of software running, a lot of different calls that we do, and we're always adding more to really fine-tune for patient needs. So that's coming into this, that's what we have. Okay, I skipped ahead of my brain. The calls can confirm the patient identity because we're dealing with protected health information. We need to make sure we're delivering information to the right person. So we don't just call a phone number and say, hey, you need a mammogram. We call, make sure we're talking to the right person, sometimes even going so far as to confirming their date of birth to make sure we're talking to the right person before we give them their health information, which is the next bullet point, the health information. You're due for a colonoscopy. You may need a flu shot. And then we can also, as I mentioned when I was starting transition, record the patient data for analysis. Like, okay, your weight was this, your weight yesterday was something else. That went up 3 pounds, that might be a red flag, let's tell the provider. And in general, just giving the information back to the providers. For example, with the flu shot call, if they say they got their flu shot in March, we can tell providers, okay, we called this population, 50% didn't have their flu shots, 30% did have their flu shots and got them 2 months ago, got them 1 month ago, because then that's data that they can use and they can monetize. So this is a very high-level overview of our architecture, where we have, I'm not sure how many people have worked with traditional IVR software, But we have a voice browser, which is analogous to a web browser that eats the voice XML from the application server and does the interaction with patients. So that's the one that reads the XML and then converts it into the audio files and harnesses the automatic speech recognition and the text-to-speech software to actually interact with the patients. But that's fairly dumb. It's just interpreting the voice XML it's getting from the application servers. It's where all the programming language, all the flow and programming logic sits to determine which questions to ask next, which prompts to actually play. So those are the two big ones there, as you'll see in 3 slides down the road, because those will be replaced by Connect. So why Amazon Connect? Essentially, when we have this platform, we're always looking for new software, new ways to do things, improvements to get faster calls, well, not faster calls, well, maybe faster calls, more faster development, better security, better stability, better scaling, things that we all want. So when I heard about Amazon Connect, I was excited because it's Amazon. It has a good reputation for hosting. No one's going to say, Amazon, that's scary. Again, and it's a recognizable name. If I go to my boss's boss and say, Genesis is a great product, the question is, who's Genesis? Or, hey, Avaya just got out of Chapter 11, they have good deals, who's Avaya? If I say, Amazon has some good stuff, yay, Amazon. And on a more utility note for my team and my teams around there, the technologies like the AWS, Poly, and Lex are used in other places besides IVR. Again, you say you do voice XML, that'll get you jobs with voice XML. You say you've used Poly and Lex, that opens you up to chatbots and other natural language kind of products, which is just valuable for everyone's LinkedIn. I know a lot of voice designers also work in the chat field as well, so it's valuable to have that experience. So reasons, and the next reason that's great about this, it's the cloud. You remember my previous one where we have the voice browser and application server, and we have to worry about all the different servers and things. Now it's just the cloud, we don't care, it's Amazon. So they don't have to worry about the servers or instances, that's all their job. Dynamic scaling, we won't worry about, oh no, we will only contract it for 200 seats or 300 concurrent calls. They handle that, we don't worry about it, and it's a flat rate per minute. We don't have to contract out, okay, how much it's going to cost? It's going to cost 3 cents per minute for the first 100 calls and 2 cents a minute. I think it's 1.5 or 2 cents a minute. Don't have to worry about it. So I personally like that because I don't have to think about pricing or. And then security is a big thing when you're doing the healthcare. We have to protect the health information. You have to follow the rules, or else no one's going to use your product. So the Amazon Connect in 2017 was put on Amazon's HIPAA list, and everything on their HIPAA list has the SOC 2, the system and organizational controls, which essentially, when you say anyone can say they're HIPAA, and it's not a problem until there's a breach. SOC 2 essentially has a third party go in and say, yes, everything's secure, this is what their plan is, this is their measures, and gives confirmations that everything is solid. So that's important here. The other big thing, as I mentioned, we do primarily outbound calls, and in March of 2018, Connect got outbound calling functionality, which otherwise we couldn't use the product at all if it was only inbound calls, and we do outbound calls. So it has a nice outbound calling API that we can also send parameters to, so we don't have to do any kind of ugly logic when we first do a call. We can send Connect a call, say, call this person with this name, with these other fields, like they'll need a colonoscopy, they'll need this or that, and we don't have to do an ugly lookup at the beginning of a voice call to figure out what the call is for, because that's the last thing you want to do is call a person and then have them wait 10 seconds while you figure out why you're calling them. That is bad patient experience all around. I'm flying a little bit through this, which I apologize for, but the last guy did go on a little late, and we have lunch soon. And the last reason that I was excited for potentially using Amazon Connect for our purposes is the NLU, the natural language understanding. In a traditional voice XML environment, you don't have direct access to NLU. You have SRGS grammars, which you can build up enough so it feels like NLU, but it's not the magic of Amazon where you're teaching an API to do whatever you want You essentially have to lay out each potential phrase or each potential combination that you'll be speaking with. So it's not as flexible, but we have NLU everywhere. In the worst case, you don't have to worry about all those edge cases when you're saying yes or no, and I'll pick up yes, sure, and yes it is. They'll just figure it out. In the best case, you can have those nice Amazon Alexa style interactions with patients, which I know my designers would really like if we had more easily available. But then we have some headaches because not everything works out too well, unfortunately. If you read the description for this, it's from our evaluation of the technology, not implementing or using it. So there are some bad sides down here. The first one is it's not the voice XML, which if you remember from the earlier slides, we have over 200 applications written that generate voice XML for the browser to consume. To move it onto Amazon Connect, we would have to rewrite every application, which I'd be willing to do for all those benefits. We knew that going in that this would be a potential issue, but it's still just a cost and a headache. The next one is we have the really nice NLU voice recognition, but it's all through Lex. Amazon Connect itself only handles the DTMF, the dual tone multi-frequency, essentially the touch tone buttons, the pressing 0, like Peter was saying in the keynote. So if you want to use the voice recognition, you have to build Lex bots. So you can either build a bunch of tiny Lex bots for each menu, so this menu can handle yes, no, this menu can handle what kind of procedure, or you build all your logic in Lex and then have Amazon Connect go to Lex for most of the call and only exit for transferring or ending the call. In general, that's just a headache. I don't know if you guys have ever played inside AWS, but going between different modules is a pain, and in general, having 2 different development environments to build one application is not something I like to do as a developer. Another relatively big headache is there's no campaign management. Right now, there's only the API for doing the dialing, which means if we're going to determine who to call when and do load balancing or I have the word right there, outbound, the load and outbound. For example, we have a lot of applications where we're calling for an individual provider, like a doctor's office, to get calls back to do a scheduling. So we need to make sure for those calls, we want to do them one at a time because they could transfer back, and we want to call 3 people to a doctor's office and have them be overloaded because then that's an awful patient experience. So if we were going to go to the Amazon Connect route, we'd have to rebuild this all on our own instead of using our current solution, because our current solution only works with the existing vendor. And then the other relatively big headache is the outbound dialing itself is throttled. I think Amazon didn't want people to hop on Amazon Connect and then do a 1 million call blast campaign over the course of an hour, because that would be a nightmare for robocalls, which I know we are too, but ours are good. So we can only do so many. We can only do up to 100. We can only start 120 a minute, which is a relatively low throughput for the kind of traffic we're doing today. Currently, we throttle around 250 concurrent calls and are going to be increasing that as time goes on. So we either have to juggle multiple instances, which defeats the purpose of doing cloud. Then we have to back end ourselves into then figuring out where we're dialing where. So that's not great. But then we could get around that. We could juggle multiple instances. We could rewrite the calls. Then we get into the actual roadblocks, where these are the hard stops and why we haven't actually implemented today. Now, if you guys are going to any other healthcare-related talks while you're at Voice, the big one is Lex doesn't have the HIPAA compliance. It's not on the list yet. It's going to be there soon. Amazon hired their healthcare team. You can taste the fact that it's almost there. But right now, Lex isn't on their HIPAA list. It doesn't have the SOC 2. Which means if you want to do any kind of voice recognition in the call, you can't have the SOC 2, or you can have the SOC 2, but then only DTMF with the buttons, and you feel like you're in the 1980s, which no one will buy. You could probably get around this with only having certain questions and avoiding asking healthcare-related questions while in Lex. But then, even if you do that, it's just a big question when you're selling to clients. Like you're SOC 2 up to this point, and have to explain why you're not SOC 2 here. Which, no. And the other big one is there's no voicemail detection. You do an outbound call, it calls that number, picks up right away, assumes it's a person, and starts talking. One of the big things I was trying to find when I was looking at Amazon Connect is what their voicemail detection rate is. It's impossible to have perfect voicemail detection rate just because voicemails are audio over the same channel as the call itself. No one's gonna have that perfect. I was hoping Amazon would be really close because they have the nice machine learning and AI and buzzwords, really good, and it's actually 0%. So that's not great. No one will buy that if we can't leave a message to say, hey, we tried to call you and you had an appointment, but you didn't pick up, here's your data, here's your payload. You'd have to write every call assuming it might be a patient or a voicemail, and that's not gonna be a good experience for the voicemail or the patient. So work kind of stopped there, but really excited to do it. Now there are good uses right now in healthcare, just not our uses. Just a few bullet points. It's really good for the inbound calls, for like the phone trees where you're trying to reach a person, trying to reach a doctor. Press 1 to talk to our scheduling department. Press 2 to talk to another department. Now I can't think of good names. I should have thought more of examples there. But that can handle it really well because there's not going to be any kind of patient information that you're handling. Or more simple applications where the voice isn't as big a deal, like a regular burst of appointment reminder. Press 1 to confirm you're going, press 2 to say you're not going, which even if that hits a voicemail, it's not going to be as big a deal because you can repeat it over and over and they'll get the message and it'll be really nice, really smooth, and work really good, just without the nice voice interactions, which patients want. That said, I have a few more bullet points about what this could become, and could be anything. It could, again, I mentioned it's only a matter of time before Lex has HIPAA compliance. When voice was announced and I started putting this presentation together, Poly, the TTS engine that's used by Alexa, was not HIPAA compliant, did not have SOC 2. While I was writing this, they got that and it was big news. So it's right there, just not yet, which will change the whole presentation. I was a little worried at the keynote they would announce that and then I'd have to panic and change this whole presentation again. Another thing that could happen, that's happened with other parts of AWS, is they could break the Connect part into its individual components, like the dialer and the different interaction models and the phone trees, which I think happened with, I think that was CloudFront that did that. That was a piece of a bigger product that they then brought down into the smaller issues. I always have hope that maybe they'll implement voice XML. That's pushing on a 20-year standard for the one currently in production, so it's unlikely because it's not well maintained anymore, but there are newer voice standards that they could potentially implement, like State Control XML, which is the spiritual successor to voice XML, which anyway, any kind of standard would make this whole process a lot better to not have to lock yourself in. Okay, and I thought I was gonna do that in 40 minutes, and that was 20 minutes, so. Do we have any questions now that I've blazed through that guy? All right.
What do you think of the overall accuracy of both voice recognition and language understanding that in your testing that you're able to achieve? How do you think about that accuracy rate, and what do you think you need to have something that is a viable offering?
Well, the nice part about our products, at least, is they're outbound, so we're kind of setting the tone where essentially, the term is directed dialogue. We're calling them because you have an appointment. We're calling you because we think that you need a colonoscopy. So it's not as slick and fancy as the duplex demo, which I'm sure everyone in the room has seen with the pretending you're a person. But you can do that because when you're calling someone and you've set that tone already, you can anticipate better what they're going to say. It's not like having a dot sitting in your room where you could say, hey, dance like a pony or something like that. You know you're calling them about their appointment. You know they're going to respond in that kind of manner. So you can get really you can get really nice. You can even build really nice static grammars like we have now. And as long as you follow up and listen to your recordings and make sure everything is working smoothly, you can build that up to a really good model where you're having really high detection accuracy things. It depends on this. Typically, it's more yes/no because you don't want to give too many options to overwhelm someone who just picked up the phone in the middle of the day. That being said, if we have other things like date collects or more basic things, but you can also do things like, we'll offer different kind of colonoscopy tests, like a traditional colonoscopy, or there's a test called a fit kit, where we'll offer those kind of options. But again, they're relatively limited in scope where it's not say anything. Again,
Someone said, no, I need to reschedule. When's the time I can reschedule? That one we're trying to handle.
potentially we could. It's just with our product today, we're not closely linked with the clients and their databases. So we could build a call that says, you want to reschedule, okay, what day, what time, and then put that in, and then the client has to go through, follow up, and then follow up with them to make sure everything's processed, which is more of a back and forth that we traditionally don't do today. Oh, I'm sorry, I'll get you.
What are the types of healthcare partners that you're working with to vet the technology and other parts of the question? The other parts of the, I'll repeat it. What types of healthcare customers are you working with to vet the technology? And then the other part to that question is, what type of data analytics do you provide as far as the results go?
To vet the technology?
Yeah, just to try it out, test it, pilot it.
That really depends on the client. We have anywhere from very large healthcare providers and insurance companies. I know Aetna is one of our big names that we do a lot of work with, to lower level partners, which I wish I should have put a partner list on this slide. That would have been a great idea. But typically we'll find a client who's willing to pilot one of our new programs or new calls and test it with a smaller population, which will then go and we'll have a limited recording set of the new calls, as well as all of the interaction and response data that we'll analyze with the clients to make sure that we're getting the proper engagement rates and that people are reacting in the way that we're expecting. So usually we find really good results, especially our flu shot call. When we do populations that don't get the call versus that do, we have a much higher engagement rate for the people who do get the call to actually get the shot, on top of all the extra data, finding out that they got the shot, but we didn't know it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you use any of the agent side stuff for Connect? Did you do an evaluation on that?
I looked at it. It's not our primary purpose. It looks really slick because you can, agents can get a separate login and go in and have it be essentially a phone interface to get a spot sitting in the queue waiting for queue transfers from the Connect dialogue flows. So it seems really nice. It's not my day-to-day, so I haven't done that as much. That depends on client preferences. Typically, we do a more basic just name confirmation. Are you Joseph Dangelmaier, yes or no? Which typically for the level of health data we have patients are okay with. For the more sensitive ones, we'll confirm their name and then their date of birth. We'll say, are you Joseph Dangelmaier, yes? Okay, we have your health message, but please enter your date of birth now so we can confirm your identity, which is a nice solid 2-layer block for most things besides family members. But we're currently using the Aspect platform, the product suite that was originally Voxeo, if you remember those guys from maybe 5 or 6 years ago. That's the platform we're on today, but we're always looking for new solutions and more modern approaches. All right.
So you say you guys can use Lex, right? Because of it's not HIPAA yet. But
Yes.
what do you guys use to understand the interaction
Right
between
now,
you and the patient that you call?
we use a more traditional ASR engine. The one we're using today is, we used to be Liquindo. No, it's a different.
That's okay.
Yeah.
My secondary question is that provided by Amazon, or this is a third-party
This-
ASR type stuff?
This is a vendor that's subcontracted with Aspect.
Okay.
So it's all linked inside their data centers from their voice browser to the ASR engine. So it's all internal to them and HIPAA compliant and
All
things
right,
like that.
So in other words, the whole ASR thing is not part of the Amazon.
Nothing in our solution today is part of Amazon.
Okay, got it. Thank you. that's probably the reason that you couldn't go live, right? Because you gotta, with Amazon, you want to do Lex, right?
Well, yeah, we can't, if we do calls without without any voice recognition, it's an ancient solution at that point where you could put it together with regular cheap open source IVR software. It can do DTMF fine, and then there's no point to go this route when you can just do that for fractions of the cost.
I was just gonna ask if the vendor was nuanced.
No, I wish we would. Nuance actually charges a bit more than LumenVox. LumenVox is the vendor we use for ASR. But I'm a big fan of Nuance. I used to use them previously. You guys have amazing products. So, anything else? People have filtered out nicely for lunch, which I think was the plan all along, because there's a walk to those food trucks, and you don't want to miss it. Thank you, everybody.